So Grassington lies on Wharfedale. The river starts 15 miles further up where two becks meet. So it's Greenside Beck and Outer Shore Beck. They meet at Beckerman's to form the River Wharfe. And that's what we see coming down here. This is taken from Malham Moor Road. It's the road, which I'll show you later on, that climbs up to Bordley. And like I say, I don't think many people go up there, but I think it's one of the best vistas that you can see. This is where you got sort of Grassington all the way around here, and then all the moors around it. It's one of those sort of shots that you can't really see unless you're walking right on the tops. So this is where we're coming to Grassington. So I'm going to show you the full route that I'm taking. It's fairly simple, really. It's just near enough a circle. But I'm going to set off at Threshfield down here. That's on the main road from Skipton to Grassington. That's about between 9 and 10 miles away, and it's one of the fastest ways of getting up here. And maybe if you're coming from the sort of Harrogate direction, you might go through Bolton Abbey and then come up through Burnsall, and if so, you're going to come up this road here from Burnsall and to reach Threshfield. From Threshfield, I'm going up the main road that goes up the valley, but taking the first left-hand turn after the petrol station, and it's unmarked, but it goes up to Skythorns, which is a little hamlet, and there's a quarry that you can visit there as well. It's not called Skythorns Quarry unusual, it's called Threshfield Quarry, and there's a public footpath around there. This is the road then that continues to climb up the moor and to go to Bordley. And like I say, it's when you're up here, you're right on the top. You can walk across from here to Mastiles Lane. It's about a 10-minute walk away, or you come to Bordley here. Like I said, population 23. And then coming back down to join the main road, coming all the way up to Kilnsey, to the Trout Farm, and then to look at Kilnsey Crag around here. So that's as far as I'm going to go today. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to come from Kilnsey, crossing across to Coniston, looking at the Dib, which is a dry valley that goes up to the footpath that goes across here, which is part of the Dales Way that comes out of Grassington lower down. So I'm going to look around Coniston and then come down to Grassington, go all the way up the hill up to where the lead mines were at Yarnbury, tour around Grassington, and then coming down to this area around here at the bottom end of Linton. It's rather unusual because you've got Threshfield School, which is a primary school from 1649, I think it is, near the Linton Falls, and Linton Church is at the end of that track, but the actual village of Linton is a mile further over there. That's the one that has got the very fine almshouse there, thought to have been created in the end of the 18th century, and that's where the sort of the tour around here is going to finish. So that's about a 10-mile drive around there to see all that. But like I say, there's a lot to see in that area. So let's set off at Threshfield. So this is the first part of it I'm going to do. Threshfield. I'm going to come down this road a little here because this is the main road that goes up to Burnsall and to Bolton Abbey. But just at this junction around here is where we call it the Yorkshire Dales Railway, but that's the railway that came out of Skipton and terminated, they said at Grassington, but it never did. It terminated here, where it's now a care home, and that was the hotel for the railway station. So this railway line came across here. It's still partly in use today because at this junction here is Swindon Quarry, and it's owned by Tarmac, and that quarrying still takes place around there, and all the limestone is then put onto the goods train there, which trundles away all the way down using that old railway track. It goes into Skipton, goes round a big bend in Skipton, and then comes down to Leeds, and then it's made it's either used as aggregate or is used for the cement trade as well, down at Sturton by the side of the M1 or whatever it's called nowadays, M621, coming into Leeds on the way out there. So that's a bit about that. So we're coming up here, then I said I'm taking that first left, and then coming to Threshfield Quarry, and then finishing there on this first leg of it. So this is the main road that comes into Threshfield. So this is the view you get down, coming over the bridge here, that was built in 1816. That was a new build because the old road came further up here. And that's why it's account for some of the properties being built behind the main road, because the old main road came only 100 yards further up. And so these properties wouldn't have looked this way onto the bridge then. It had been sort of the edge of the village. So this bridge was again rebuilt in 1853, and it became a turnpike road really in the 1780s, as we'll see around there. So the old road used to bend up round there. So we're coming up to the where the red post box is, and this is at the bottom of the green, or they call it the park around here. Well, I'm going to come up this road here, which is called the main street, and then turn right. And then I'm going to return back along here to this little junction here. So it's a triangle in here. And that's the Old Hall pub that stands immediately across the road. So you see when I'm coming back on the bit of film that I'll be facing the Old Hall pub. But there's a very interesting building here called the Manor House, which is actually best seen from this direction. I've got a bit of a buzzing on my head microphone, so that seems to finish now. So this is the manor. This was, because it got this unusual rose sort of window in it. It was a part of an Elizabethan house and then much rebuilt in the time since then. It's got a lower extension here, which was built in the 1920s, because that was a butchery that was attached to that building. And then if you look across, you can see the green is called the park. It's got the old stocks in the middle around here. But if you look at the side there, that's was a water fountain, a drinking trough for animals. It wasn't here, but it was by the Primitive Methodist Chapel. That stands still today, and we'll see it in a minute, at the junction where you turn right to go down to Grassington. And that's where this was. And as a plaque said, it was moved down from that site and placed here in 1953 to commemorate the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in that year. So I'm coming up this road here, as they call it, the main street, and then turning right at the end. And this is the link road that goes out to that main road that comes up Bolton Abbey, Burnsall, and then into Threshfield. Here we have the Village Institute. This was once an estate woodworking shop, and in 1945, at the end of the war, was then converted into the Village Institute, which it remains today for small classes here as well. So if you continue up here, just past the brow, where you can see these signs there, that's where you meet the main road that comes up here from Burnsall. And this is where you can see a good view here of the Yorkshire Dales Railway that came in from Skipton and terminated in Threshfield itself. It opened on Tuesday, the 29th of July, 1902, and it took 2 years to build, because the first sod being cut June the 7th, 1900. It was never popular as it was meant to open up sort of Grassington for day visitors, but in fact it was never particularly popular, and actually closed for passengers in 1930. That might be because of the advent of cars after the war, with people taking day trips out up there to begin with, and maybe that Bolton Abbey still proved more popular than coming up to Grassington. I'm going to say goods, it used as a goods route up until 1969, and then was terminated then. And it now only goes as far as Swindon Quarry, which is about a mile further to the right down there. So it's still in use, and I guess that people might think that it could work as a heritage railway and link in with the one at Skipton, at the empty Bolton Abbey way, because that would make quite a good loop coming around there. So it's only about a mile or so, and this field here is largely used for sheep around here as well. So that's the road, the bridge that goes underneath the old railway track there. So I'm now coming back to that main road here, the Skipton, Grassington Road, and facing the Old Hall Inn. takes its name because the old hall stands today, a part of it, behind the pub here as well. Because this was built around about 1780 as a coaching inn. So this is really when the road between Grassington and Skipton was made into a turnpike. So Threshfield's been quite an important place, really. There's a lane, or you can go down here, and there's a lane the other side, which takes you to the car park around the back of the Old Hall Inn. And this is where you can see just the remnant of Threshfield Old Hall. You say this was another monastic grange, a sheep farm, which quite Abbey, which it did belong to, but it's probably Bolton Priory, more like here. And this has got the similar type of windows that we'll see higher up the dale at Kilnsey, and that's where Fountains Abbey had a grange at the bottom of Mastiles Lane. So it probably dates from something like the 14th century, they think. Continue back onto the main road, and we go past these more modern houses built in 1966, these council houses that stand back from the road. Coming round there, that's where the primitive Methodist chapel is, at the junction of the road, Station Road, that leads down to Grassington, over the bridge over the Wharfe and up the other side. This was built in 1878 and is still in use today, although it must be in pretty poor condition. Each time I go, it seems to be more and more sort of in need of some tender, loving care of that building. Opposite now stands that new petrol station that was built in 2016, 2017. And then on the film, taking, as you'll see, the first left-hand turn. It's unmarked, but it's a small junction on the main road that goes up the valley. And this goes down to Skythorns. So you go past some modern housing on the right-hand side, and eventually there is a turning to the right. At one time, you could actually drive all the way up to what this picture I'm showing you here. But in 2020, it was suddenly discovered by, I think, younger people. If I got a bit of a buzzing on here as well again, by younger people, and they sort of used it as the quarry pool, as it.If by the sea, which led to them cutting off public access down that road because I think it was basically given as a right of way by tarmac to stop people going down there, and they've actually drained the pool, as you'll see. I'll show you the next photograph because this is what the quarry looks like. But this pool had certainly enlarged from taking this photograph and come over, but it was sort of translucent blue, and I think it was discovered by young people, and the police had to move them off in the summer of this year and close that. You can still access it because you'll see here, coming back to it, is that the signage boards around here right at the entrance to it, and the public footpath is just slightly up the road from the entrance. So you'll see where you can park your car by the entrance, but you've got to walk 100 yards up it and then walk along the public footpath to access this site, unfortunately. But the quarry here opened in 1902 and was in use until 2003. They were digging or quarrying the limestone here and then burning it on site. So these are the rails that went into the kilns, and it's a bit more modern than these sort of older kilns, although it's still being built into the hillside. So the tracks took it in, and inside there they came into they converged from another. So the track went to the left and one to the right. And again, in all of these, so that each of these tunnels fed two of the chambers up here. And then they had like an iron structure or a steel structure on top of that. And again, I say it was still the old way of creating sort of lime by burning it in these furnaces over a long period of time. At the end, this made the powder called quicklime, and that was either exported for use in the building industry in mortar, or was used to spread on fields as a fertilizer. So the road that you come up here, Skythorns Lane, is actually the track bed of a small scale railway, and that small scale railway went all the way down to the railway station at Threshfield. So that's why there's fairly well made road up here into this site. So that's the view you get of it. It's owned by Tarmac Lafarge, as it's called at the moment. When quarrying came to an end in 2003, they said they would restore the site, well, as much as they can, but you can see how they've planted the trees here. And they've actually put an access footpath around it, and there's a wooden platform that you can climb up to see this. And like I say, that's probably why it's proved quite popular this year, because it's sort of hidden from view, but hundreds of young people started coming up here, and like I say, unfortunately now you can no longer drive up, because you could actually drive up into this area just round here, and then it was a simple walk across to the quarry, where now I'd say it's probably a 15-minute walk from the Skirethorns lane up to the quarry itself, and then you've got to go back down to look at the where the kilns were as well, where all the signage is as well. So let's look at this bit of footage here, setting off from Threshfield and coming as far as the quarry. So the next bit of a trip I'm taking really from that quarry following this road up. It goes up for about another 2.5 miles. So you're thinking that you can't park and you don't really know where it's going to go, but it comes up to here, and this is where you come across a cattle grid. And because there's no really, it's only farm access around there, because the rest of the road, it comes into a rutted track, goes to Bordley here. So that's the one that's got a population of 23. I think it's probably just 2 or 3 farms around there huddled together, you can see. And you can see where that road that comes up from Goredale Scar finishes at Newhouse, although you can't drive all the way up there because that's really only a farm access road as far as there. Then it goes on to the farm track up to the farm. But you can see how close they are to one another. And it also butts onto another valley as well. Coming down here, this is where the Winterburn Reservoir is, a bit further down here, just off the map. The Winterburn Reservoir goes into Hetton, which is near Cracoe, on the main road coming up the valley again from Skipton to Grassington. Hetton's got the Angel Inn. It's sort of one of the original gastropubs in the area, in Britain, indeed. So that's where I'm coming up here. And I say it's well worth coming up here, really, because of the journey back down, those fantastic views that you do get across the valley, across to Skipton. There's really not much to see up here, but it's, like I say, if you want to come and walk up here, it's taking that enormous climb out from coming up the valley side. And what we see, well, what we can't quite see across here, but Mastiles Lane cuts across. That's probably the line of it coming across here. It's the easiest way to walk to it, because it's a flat, straight route across there. So from here to Malham, Malham Tarn, it's about 4 miles. On that bit of footage I showed you earlier on the Malham one, it comes out there. And then to the right, it goes down to Kilnsey. So if you can walk up really up to the watershed, and you get fantastic views right across Wharfedale, but you can't see the bottom of it. So you're looking across to Coniston and behind there. This rock here has actually got a plaque on the other side, and that says that on the 10th of June 2001, the farmer who had his sheep up here, I've just lost it, the Stevenson family, had all their animals culled in the foot and mouth crisis of that year. Just behind me is a grindstone wall. This is the metalled road that actually peters out just over here. And so you're really forced to park by the cattle grid. You can see where other people have parked as well. And behind me, there's a dry stone wall. If you follow that down, you can actually see this here. They call it the Bordley Stone Circle, but it's not a stone circle. This was a Bronze Age chamber tomb up here. It would have been covered over and probably had soil at the either side as well. And you can see it collapsed the top of it, whether it was made up of wood or there was some sort of stone across it, or it was just infilled with mud. People don't really know. But it's left behind these stones here that stand in a sort of circle around it. That's why people call it the stone circle. So Bronze Age man was living right up here. We've seen the Iron Age field systems a bit further over at the top of Malham Tarn Cove as well. So really keeping to those higher lands up there. And then coming down this track, you come to actually the hamlet of Skythorns. So most of these properties around here are 17th century. So they just stand a little higher up by the above the access road into the quarry. So the quarry essentially is the other side of these. So it's just been, again, another small farming hamlet, a little sort of beck runs down through the middle of it. That's not an old building. That was built in 2009 as a garage. And some of this machinery that's been left here, that's ironworks, came from a blacksmith workshop that was further down the lane. So I think it's on here, the bit of film. Perhaps it's on the next one. Let's have a look at the bit of film coming down here. So we're starting off from point, that's where the, near enough where the stone circle is up there, coming down through the hamlet of Skythorns, joining the main road, and this time I'm coming all the way up to Kilnsey. So this is the, the film of that. Coming in, the Kilnsey Park and Trout Farm is a sort of commercial venture, opened in 1978. And it's made up, like you see from the aerial film, of a number of these sort of ponds that they've created down here. So it's open for two types of sort of fishing. There's the where you can turn up maybe just by yourself and have a bit of fun fishing and take children or grandchildren along. You can hire a rod there for £7, but if you land a fish and keep it, they charge you £3 for that. These ponds nearer the road, which runs along here, therefore fly fishermen, and prices there start at £17. There's a farm shop there as well, which sort of sells local produce and fish from the farm. And they also have a well laid out walk as well, but they charge you for having a look around as well. So to look at the trout breeding ponds, and they have a red squirrel enclosure up there and wild plants and all sorts of other things around there. They charge you £4.50 as an adult and £3.50 as a child to take round there. Like I say, they've put 100 native sort of flowers and grasses around there as well. So it's a large car park. The car park is free. You can park there and have a quick wander around if you want on the sort of bits which are open to the public without having to pay to go in, unless of course you're a keen fisherman. You say just coming up the road just beyond there, as I showed you, this was the former site of Fountains Grange. You say this was sort of it came about in 1155 when Alistair Romilly of Skipton donated land for the establishment of Bolton Priory and gave these lands at Kilnsey to Fountains Abbey. And say until 1539, they're owned by Fountains Abbey, because that's 30 miles away from here near Ripon. Because they had Mastiles Lane to link it to their lands up at Malham Tarn. In fact, that Mastiles Lane linked in with other tracts because it had land as far away as the Lake District. So Kilnsey Grange here was very important because this is where the wool was brought down here, and I guess that sheep were brought down here to be clipped in the river Wharfe just across the road from it as well. So it had been a very important, really trading position to get all that wool from here right across to Fountains Abbey. Fountains Abbey then in turn would have marketed that largely through Beverley, and that's where they could get it out to sort of the Northern Europe and across to Italy, because they were selling wool, and then the finished cloth was imported back into Britain. And most of what you can see today, apart, because this is an original part of the gatehouse into the Grange, and that was largely rebuilt in 1648. And then Mastiles Lane, that's where I've walked from Bordley to take this photograph to the top of it, but here, that's the top of Kilnsey Crag across there. And as you see on the bit of film, this massive thing here is the quarry that stood behind Kilnsey Crag as well, and you'll see that on the bit of film as well. So I mentioned before, this track was probably built by the Romans for their marching camp, and then used by Fountains Abbey and also by Coverham Abbey. I mentioned earlier, Coverham Abbey would have then come up the dale to Kettlewell, about 4 miles away, and then they're going across the tracks there down to Coverdale to the Abbey there, which stands near Middleham Castle. Like I say, you need to walk up here on a clear day because of these fantastic views. This view just across there, we might just be able to see, that's Coniston Dib, and that's a dry valley that I'll be looking at on Wednesday, the other side of the River Wharfe. Coming back into the village, we've got the pub here called the Tennant Arms, largely because this is named after the sale of the lands around here after the dissolution, and then the lands here were tenanted by the owner of the Kilnsey estate. And there's no longer a Kilnsey estate anymore. That was sold off in 1911. So that's really how it gets its name. And then just beyond that, we've got Kilnsey Crag itself. The whole of the dale of this upper and middle part of Wharfedale is made of lower carboniferous limestone, sometimes known as Great Scar limestone. And you can see here very well, it's laid down in horizontal layers. And this is when Yorkshire was near enough on the equator, and this had a warm, deep sea coming right across this area. And this was around about sort of 300 million years ago. And then fast-flowing waters, river waters, really coming from Scotland, largely because Scotland had been slightly uplifted at that time. And so we see a lot of this meltwater coming down here and bringing down, rather became a bit of a river delta around here, but it brought down mudstones and sand and other things, shales, that largely coat the lower part of the dale here to form the millstone grit from the sandstone. There's a little bit in this area that coat the top of some of the dales around here, but they are largely limestone around here. So that's why there's a difference between coming down the dale, sort of when you get to Burnsall, then you have the millstone grit moors, and it's a millstone grit moors that have the heather that comes into bloom during August. So you won't get any heather in this area because there isn't enough sandstone or shales around here, but there's only sort of little bits of it where it begins to start really, but it's mostly limestone around here. The crag is 170 foot high and was really created by two glaciers. We have the glacier coming down Wharfedale, which you'll see on the bit of film is how the U shape is. And then we have the glacier here coming behind it, coming down Littondale. So it's really where the two glaciers meet, but it undercut this sort of spur of limestone that stuck out into the valley. Must be maybe a harder edge of it as well. And then it ground against it. So coming round as a sort of a U shape, and that's what created the crag. Here, you can probably just see where the rock climbers are, but just a little higher up, there's an overhang. This is one of the biggest in Britain. It's really 30 to 40 foot. And this is where it sort of comes horizontally across. And that's why the rock climbers love it, because it's such a challenge to climb underneath that overhang and then go up again. And like I say, you'll see some climbers on that as well. So let's have a look at the bit of footage of Kilnsey Crag. So Kilnsey Crag. So I'll just finish on another bit of film for a bit of fun, because it incorporates a little bit of what we've just seen just there. But this is of Kilnsey Show, which takes place normally at the end of August every year. So it takes place on, I think it's Bank Holiday Monday in August. It has done since 1897, apart from this year as well. So this is just looking at the Kilnsey Show.
Our route lies ahead, and the massive overhang of Kilnsey Crag. It looks insurmountable, but climbers love it. It stands 170 feet high, and the overhang is over 30 feet, making it the largest in England. It was formed by the Littondale and Wharfedale glaciers meeting and undercutting the rock. In late August, the field opposite the crag becomes home to the biggest agricultural show in Wharfedale, when farmers from round about bring their sheep and cattle for judging. Again, a fell race, where runners run to the top of the crag and then have to negotiate a treacherous rock chimney on the return journey to the show field. Besides judging of the sheep and cattle, there are also sheepdog trials, and the day ends with harness races.